Part 5. Anjin Ketsu Josho. Why by just thinking of Amida Buddha exclusively assures our birth in the Pure Land. Broadly speaking, Nembutsu means thinking of the Buddha. Thinking of the Buddha means thinking of the merit consummated by the Buddha's great Vow-karma power to cut off the bonds which tie sentient beings to the condition of birth and death, and thereby enable them to be born in the recompensed land of non-retrogression. When we thus think of the Buddha's merit, write on the original vow, and take refuge in it, our threefold activity is raised to the level of the Buddha's enlightenment, by leaning on the Buddha's body. Therefore, the Nembutsu Samadhi under discussion is not our own practice, even though we recite, worship, and think. We should take it as performing Amida's practice. The original vow is the one which Amida produced after 5 kalpas of contemplation. Karma power means the bodhisattva practices he performed for millions of kalpas, and also the vast merit and virtue of Buddhahood, which has become manifest after his enlightenment 10 kalpas ago. Amida took great pains to cultivate this merit and virtue of vow and practice, solely for the sake of ignorant people of the future evil ages, like us. When he had severed the bonds of each and every one of the sentient beings of the 10 directions, which tied them to the condition of birth and death, and had thus fulfilled the vow and practice, thereby producing the recompensed land of non-retrogression, he consummated the enlightenment of the unity of the rescued and the rescuer. To think of the essence of enlightenment is called the Nembutsu Samadhi. Therefore the Nembutsu Samadhi should not reside in our threefold activity. In the normal course of practice, we are supposed to perform the practice ourselves, to cut off the bonds of birth and death, and carry out the vow and practice for entering the recompensed land. However, the specially universal vow, being such that it transcends the law, that one attains a specific result by performing a specific causal practice, the Buddha has accomplished ordinary beings' birth in the Pure Land with his great vow, karma, power. If we take refuge in him with a feeling of gratitude for what he has done for us, our threefold activity works as a positive agent, that is, of writing the vow-power, and Amida's vow-power becomes an object of it, that is, a vehicle to take us to the recompensed land of the recompensed Buddha. Hence, it is said that when one's mind and heart of taking refuge rides on the original vow, all one's threefold activity leans on the Buddha's body. Amida's vow and practice form the very substance of the vow and practice required for our own birth in the Pure Land. Therefore, apart from the enlightenment Amida has attained, as the fruition of his vow and practice, we do not speak of any practice required for our own birth. However, though fully aware of this, some think that the Buddha's enlightenment is public property, and so, putting aside his enlightenment, they resolve, why not awaken Bodhi mind and perform practices with pure hearts? This is a deplorably attached view. Since Amida's enlightenment is the state in which our Pure Land birth has already been fulfilled, his body represents the vow and practice required for our birth. This practice is not the sort of practice which depends on some mindful act on our side. Therefore, it has been said, apart from the enlightenment Amida has attained, as the fruition of his vow and practice, we do not speak of any practice required for our own birth. To accept this enlightenment clearly in the mind is called the three minds, or Shinran. In this enlightenment, in which the unity of the rescued and the rescuer is accomplished, the name and the substance are not separate. To express this realization through the mouth is called Namu Amida Butsu. For this reason, through faith. We are brought back to Amida's once and for all consummation of enlightenment. We are brought back to it through the recitation of the name with the lips. Even if we repeat the name 1,000 times, not a single recitation goes beyond the once and for all consummation of enlightenment. Even if we spend days and nights without saying the name, or without thinking of Amida, because of tiredness and indolence, so long as our faith in other power is founded on the original vow, we realize in our hearts that since the Buddha's body represents its eternal activity, it is the body of enduring and uninterrupted practice, the name being the practice of non-action and eternal presence. This is what Shantao means by Amida Butsu, is the practice. Further, when I said above, Nembutsu Samadhi is not our practice, even though we recite, worship and think, but we are performing Amida's practices. I mean that, if our minds that take refuge in Amida ride on the original vow, and all our acts of the mind, mouth, and body rest on Amida's body, our bodies cease to exist separately from Amida, and our minds cease to exist separately from him, too. When we recite the Nembutsu with the lips, we express our gratefulness for the enlightenment of the unity of the rescued and the rescuer. When we worship, we express with our bodies the overwhelming joy over the benevolence of other power. Therefore, even though we recite and think on Amida, we do not thereby intend to amass merit, but we simply perform the practice which Amida has already accomplished for us ordinary people. Amida's body is uncreated and undefiled. Both the principal and subordinate manifestations of the Pure Land are uncreated and undefiled. Since the name and Amida's body are not separate, the name is also uncreated and undefiled. Therefore, we should concentrate on the Nembutsu Samadhi by reciting Amida's name exclusively, and, again, exclusively, as quoted above. The word exclusively is repeated. The first exclusively means abandoning miscellaneous practices and taking up the right practices, and the second one means setting aside the auxiliary acts and being absorbed in the act of right assurance. Also, the first exclusively refers to the single practice, and the second one, the single faith. Thus, the single practice and single faith are implied by exclusively and, again, exclusively. The essence of the act of right assurance is not the Nembutsu recitation, as it is practiced by ordinary people as one of their three kinds of act. The body of the Buddha, who embraces and does not forsake those who recite the Nembutsu incessantly, whether walking, standing, sitting, or lying, regardless of how long they have been practicing it, is indeed the act of right assurance for ordinary people's birth in the Pure Land. Because Amida's name and body are not separate, the name, too, is the act of right assurance. To be absorbed in the Namu Amida Butsu, in which the unity of the rescued and the rescuer is accomplished, is called the Nembutsu Samadhi. The name is uncreated and undefiled, because the unity of the rescued and the rescuer is accomplished in it through the Buddha's unhindered wisdom, without awaiting the practitioner's recitation. This implication is shown as the land of ultimate bliss, the realm of non-action. The Nembutsu Samadhi is not based on the practitioner's concentrating thought. It is to remember that the Buddha's great compassion embraces all sentient beings. The Buddha's merit has been accomplished on sentient beings, affecting the unity of the rescued and the rescuer. Therefore, when the thought of taking refuge in Amida arises in our hearts, it does not, in fact, arise in our hearts for the first time. It is the merit which has been accomplished, for both the rescued and the rescuer, manifesting in our thought. As regards the recitation of Namu Amida Butsu, 2. We do not approach the Buddha by reciting it. The merit of the Enlightenment, in which the unity of the rescued and the rescuer has been accomplished, manifests itself on our lips. We are brought back into the Buddha's body through faith. We are brought back into the Buddha's body through reciting the name. There is a parable of the sun. To distinguish other power from self-power, to seek birth in the Pure Land with self-power, is like trying to see things in the dark with our own eyes. This is clearly an impossibility. Our eyes catch the sunlight and see the objects which are reflected in it. This is due to the power of the sun. However, even if there is sunlight, which is the cause of the act of seeing, those who were born blind cannot see objects. Again, even if our eyes, which act as a condition for seeing things, are not blind, we cannot see objects in the dark. Only when the cause, which is the sun, and the condition, which is the eyes, are united, does the act of seeing become possible. In the same way, our Pure Land birth, which is a matter of the greatest importance, comes about when we receive the merit of the original vow, with the thought of taking refuge in Amida. The mind and heart of taking refuge in Amida is like the eyes, and the embracing light of Amida's compassion is like the sun. Namu is to take refuge, and is like the eyes. Amida Butsu, the enlightenment body, in which the universal vow of other power is accomplished, is like the sun. Therefore, as far as receiving the merit of the original vow goes, when those who have a stock of merit from previous lives take refuge, Namu, in Amida, and say Amida Butsu, all the merit of thousands of practices and good acts, as numerous as the sand grains of the river Ganges, are fulfilled in them, at the first utterance of that six-character name, Namu Amida Butsu. For this reason, we should not seek any other merit of goodness. Here ends Part 5. Stay tuned for Part 6. What are the four modes of birth in the Pure Land?